I'm so happy to be here. This is our second event with Mason Arlington, and we're thrilled to see some people who were at the last event as well. So, welcome. I'm Leah Mehta. I run the Cheuse Center at George Mason, and we've been in collaboration with Mason Exhibitions on many of our programs. Our theme for this year is the politics of language. The language of politics. We've spent many, many months on this program. There has been hours of work that has gone into it. Come on in. And we started in June, and we're so excited to be able to have everyone here. I want to introduce my friend, Amanda Newell, the author of Postmortem Say, with a painting on the cover by Nancy Mitchell, who's in the audience and will join us soon. Published in 2024, she is also the author of I Will Pass Even to Acheron, the 2021 winner of the Rattle Chapbook Prize. Her work has appeared and is forthcoming in Barrow Street, Bellevue Literary Review, Cimarron Review, and elsewhere. She's the recipient of fellowships and scholarships from Breadloaf, the Frost Place, VCCA, and many other places. And she's a graduate of the Warren Wilson MFA program for writers, and currently an associate editor for the Contemporary Poetry Journal, Plume. Megan Doney earned an MFA in creative writing from Lesley University and is a professor of English at New River Community College, where she teaches creative writing, composition, and literature. She was a 2007 Fulbright Hays Fellow to South Africa, and that's part of the connection to this panel, and returned to that country as a research fellow at the University of the Free State in Bloemfontein, studying reconciliation and public witnessing after violence. Her work has been published in Creative Nonfiction, Rappahannock Review, and many other places. An earlier draft of her book, Unarmed, with this incredible cover, was a semi-finalist for the 2017 Core Prize in Memoir, judged by Cheryl Strayed. After surviving a school shooting, she was an English professor traumatized and adrift. Rather than hardening her heart and life, she wrote Unarmed, an American educator's memoir. This short literary memoir is a personal response to a school shooting at New River Community College in Christiansburg, Virginia, where actually my family lives in that part of Virginia. So whenever I say Christiansburg, Virginia, in the context of your bio, I start to want to cry. Winner of the 2024 Nonfiction Prize from the Washington Writers Publishing House, she is published by Carolyn, who you'll meet soon, Caroline Bach, who is the co-director of the press. I'm going to introduce Nancy and Caroline very quickly as well, so that when they come back on the stage, we won't have introductions. Nancy is a 2012 Pushcart winner in poetry and the author of many books of poetry, including The Near Surround and The Out of Body Shop. Co-editor of Plume Interviews. She has poems that have appeared in journals such as Washington Square Review, Agni, and many more. She was awarded Artist in Resident Fellowships at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts in San Angelo, Virginia, and in France. She taught creative writing for Maryland Summer Centers for Arts, 2012 to 2014, and in the Environmental Studies program and English department at Salisbury University, where she serves as Poet Laureate of the city of Salisbury in Maryland. She's also an associate editor and special features and interviews editor at Plume Poetry, which is how she and I and Amanda met. And then Caroline Bach is co-president of Washington Writers Publishing House, Her short story collection, which is one of my favorite, is Carry Her Home, received the 2018 WWPH Fiction Prize. She is the author of 2 critically acclaimed young adult novels, Lie and Before My Eyes from St. Martin's Press. Her short fiction has appeared in many journals and is the winner of first prizes from Driftwood Press and the Writer magazine. In addition to her role as co-president, she is the prose editor at WWPH. Writes their bi-weekly literary journal, and the co-editor of 2021 anthology, That Is What America Looks Like, Fiction and Poetry in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And just to say, she's looking for, there's an open call for the latest edition of that anthology, which she could tell you more about at some point soon.
Yes, I would love to.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. We'll get started.
Just so grateful to share the stage with Amanda. Being able to speak with her, about our work has just been an unbelievable gift. And yes, everyone here has just been so thoughtful and supportive, and I'm just a little speechless at being able to be here in this place tonight. So,
how do you want to start? Well, we've spent so much time just in preparation for this and talking, and I don't know if maybe it would help for each of us to say a little bit about our pieces in our own words, so that maybe the audience could hear some of the connecting pieces between them, and really the connecting pieces is trauma.
Yeah. Okay, well, so as Leah mentioned, the seed for my memoir was the aftermath of a shooting at my college in Christiansburg, Virginia, which is where I live and teach. And so on Friday, April 12th, 2013, one of our students walked in with a shotgun and opened fire on other students and a staff member. One student and one staff member were very seriously injured. And I'm going to read part of the memoir that goes into a little bit more detail about that day. But one of the most disorienting elements of the aftermath of the shooting was the shocking lack of research about what happened to educators afterwards. So I spent hours on our library databases, like a good student and like a good teacher, searching for educators and post-traumatic stress disorder and professors and rampage shooting. And there were 2 dissertations, one from Finland and one from this country. And that was all. And I couldn't believe that was true. This was 2013, it was after Columbine and there had been dozens of school shootings in between there. And I could not understand how there was no scholarship about educators in particular. And there was a lot about students and sort of organizational culture and, campus safety and things like that. But that sort of teacher perspective was completely absent. And that was actually also really frightening, because I thought, well, what if those people, do those people all leave? I was really concerned about what happened to those educators and what I might be facing. And so eventually I kind of I realized you have to write that. You have to do that book. So, but, and I think this comes up in a lot of Amanda's poetry as well, that, and we all know this, that when we pull on a thread, all kinds of other things unravel. And so it became really clear to me over the 9 years that it took to write this book that it's impossible to talk about gun violence in this country without also talking about masculinity, what it means to be free, what it means to be safe, what it means to be responsible,
what it means to be a woman.
what it means to be a woman. I mean, it's tied in with, you know, the consumer protection that basically shields the firearms industry from liability. There are entire industries now devoted to products that will harden schools. And, you know, there's a chapter in the book where I go into some detail about, you know, the Kevlar backpacks that you can buy for your children now. And, you know, I think I could not have understood how deeply entwined gun violence and even the specter of gun violence and is embedded into our culture. So, yeah.
Yes, and so my just for, I think, important context for my collection, Postmortem say, it's about a lot of things. It's about the breakup of a marriage. It's about desire, loss of, grief, losing a child, an affair. But it's all set against the backdrop of the culture of the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And so and in a very particular way, you know, there's the hunting culture, but my ex-husband, who is now deceased, was a prosecutor for 14 years on the Eastern Shore, and he was a judge for 4 years, appointed by the governor, and then ran and was elected to be the governor. So this book was written. My book was done in 2019. Our divorce was finalized in 2020. He committed suicide on September 10th, 2021, in the wake of an FBI investigation and raid of what was my old home. The FBI had begun an investigation starting that July into his illicit photography of our boys' friends over a period of years. And nobody had any idea. And the victims didn't know that they were victims until someone found a camera. So, so I should, and just as I'm seeing, there will be sensitive. It's a sensitive topic, but that's important to know because this book was written, again, it was published and done before any of that happened, before anybody knew. And so going back and editing it after he passed away, it was I just found myself saying, wow, you know, and people that don't know think that it was written after, you know, but it's like what the body knows, right? Yeah. We've talked a little bit about this. And so that's kind of the context. So guns come up quite a bit, you know, in his job. He carried a gun every day because we had threats and that sort of thing. Yeah. So, and that reminds me actually quite a lot of what you write about with your ex-husband and having guns in the house. And I remembered identifying, there's a passage where Megan writes so beautifully about just being attracted to the sort of ruggedness of her ex-husband, who was a college professor and I think a biologist, and I identified with that, and you know, it's really complicated. So should we maybe want to get into reading something, or start with the sort of framing questions that we talked about?
We could, yeah. Why don't we could start with some of our framing questions, and I feel like, you know, Amanda's and my conversations were so, you know, when we were Zooming, it was like, and this, and this, and this, and I can already feel that kind of happening. Yes. But, yes. You know, maybe this might be, I'm going to come back to that as well. But I think one of the other things that Amanda and I both spoke about was this really jarring public and private tension about what had happened to us, because at one level, these, like, we're in the paper, you know, like what happened in our lives is very public. So that's me, you know, in the khaki jacket, and that photo, that's on the day of the shooting, and that photo was published by the times. And, I didn't see that until after the fact. I mean, there was media there very, very quickly, but it was probably 3 years later that I was at a faculty, sort of a faculty development seminar in Richmond, and there was going to be a presentation about campus safety, and I was just flipping through the handouts, and then that photo was in somebody's PowerPoint. Like, that was in their PowerPoint, and they, my name isn't in that photo. They didn't know that it was me, but it was just this. I mean, what is the response to say to someone like, just so you know, that's, the person in your PowerPoint is in this room. Like, there was no, I couldn't think of how to respond to that at all.
Were you going to read it?
What?
Were you going to read that passage?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
But yeah. But then, yeah.
Okay,
then
right.
yeah.
So this, similarly, that's in front of our house. That is, and I probably know, I'm sure, I can't tell because of the backs are toward the camera, but that's the house, that's the ambulance that morning. And I probably know some of the, I'm sure I know some of the policemen that are actually there, because my ex would have worked with them, and they would regularly, when search warrants needed to be signed and things like that, they would show up at our house to do that. But the sort of heartbreaking, and so it's, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, it's a slide of nine gallery of 9 pictures, and the sort of heartbreaking thing to me is that yep, there's our dog on the lawn. There's Rex, the yellow lab, just kind of hanging out with the police officers, and it's just that's kind of, he's a lab, so I mean, he's doing what labs do. But we had a German short-haired pointer who they were both there. And they both ended up having to be put down. They were old and elderly, but the German short-haired mouse was never, she was old enough that I think she had dementia. But it's just, it's just like you see, it resonates. It just resonates differently. And I think one of the things that we talked about is the fact that what's so difficult about that tension that you mentioned between the public and private is that you lose, and for a writer especially, like, you lose control of the narrative, right? It's like suddenly it's not yours. I don't know if you experienced that or how that resonated with you.
I think what I was thinking most of, coming back to the question of trauma, is that, these things fade out of the news cycle, but they never fade for you, like that's, I could tell you, you can only see that jacket, but I could tell you everything else that I had on that day. Like, I could give you every single one of those other, those other details. And it's a strange, it's always been a weird tension for me, because my shooting took place, like 5 miles from Virginia Tech, which is commemorated every single year. And mine is not. And that just, that's just an ache, that I think is present. So,
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I think, I'm not even sure we asked that first framing question yet, right?
No, we
didn't.
didn't.
But so,
yeah,
maybe, do you want to maybe talk about how we came to this idea of the guiding questions, because you use them in your classroom.
Sure.
And they seemed appropriate.
Yeah. So in the class that I was teaching on the day of the shooting, it was the second semester of college writing, and I had arranged the class around all these inquiry questions, like for each unit. And so we had just finished a unit that day. The students had just turned in papers for me, and the unit was about what does it mean to be safe. And so they had read and written about all kinds of things. Like, so they were, investigating like drug policy and incarceration and all kinds of things. And it was a great group. I was actually excited to read their work, and we were starting on a unit asking, what are our responsibilities to other people? And that just kind of spluttered away because the rest of the semester spluttered away. But so we decided to use we're going to use those two questions to sort of guide and maybe conclude some of our conversation later tonight. So what does it mean to be safe? What are our responsibilities to other people? And then the last one is, what does it mean to be free?
Maybe we should read a little bit about that.
Okay.
Safety. Is that,
Yeah.
do you want to start there?
Sure.
You want to start with yours?
Okay. All right, so I'm going to start with part of the chapter in my book, which is called Doors. And I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I will get through a little bit of it. When I teach my students how to write strong introductions, I use the metaphor of a door. Our job as writers is to create a door that's intriguing, welcoming, something that makes our readers so curious that they want to open it, sit down, have some tea, and explore the rest of the house. I have a few slides of stock photos of front doors, one painted crimson, fringed with flower beds and mullioned windows, an entrance to a seemingly enchanted cottage, alongside another that's scrawled with graffiti and hanging off its hinges, revealing a shadowy interior. The introduction paragraph sets up the conflict, shows us who or what we should care about, I remind them. How can we ensure our readers will walk through that door and stick with us for the rest of the essay? You can't move backward through the doors. They only propel forward momentum. There's no return. Behind door number 1, Friday, April 12th, 2013. I'm 38 years old and a full-time professor at New River Community College in Virginia. This semester, I teach at the satellite campus in Christiansburg, which is in the local shopping mall and occupies the space that was once a movie theater. The lecture auditoriums still have that feel, with a sloping center aisle and a large screen at the front. I've been separated from my husband, Tom, since October, and this afternoon I have an appointment with a lawyer in town to begin formal divorce proceedings. In a meeting with my therapist 3 days earlier, I told her that I really felt like I was doing fine. I think I'm going to be okay, I said. I don't think I need to see you every week anymore. I agree, she said. I think you were farther along in the grieving process than you thought you were. That doesn't mean, however, that the grief doesn't still pound me or that I'm always proud of how I handle things. To my shame, I spend part of my lunch break Googling my soon-to-be ex-husband's affair partner and send a woeful email to my best friends. I'm sick of her, of him, of the space they both continue to occupy in my mind. But my father is coming to visit me tonight, stopping on his way to the Outer Banks, and I'm looking forward to seeing him. I've left my little house unlocked so that in case he arrives before my workday is over, he can go on in and maybe take my dog for a walk. My afternoon class is English 112, the second semester of college composition. I love this class. My students are so smart and funny and thoughtful. All of the units in the course are oriented around an inquiry question, and the unit we've just finished asked, what does it mean to be safe? We read and discussed the intentions and impacts of drug policy, anti-bullying measures in school, and a recent article from The Atlantic arguing for more guns in the hands of civilians. They've just turned in the unit papers, which means I have long days of grading ahead of me. Still, I look forward to reading their work. Being with them is a perfect way to end the week. We're starting today on the final unit for the semester, in which we're going to interrogate the question, what are our responsibilities to other people? To begin the unit, I'm going to show a segment from When the Levees Broke, Spike Lee's documentary about Hurricane Katrina. We will be reading the New York Times article about Memorial Hospital, where some physicians administered lethal doses of painkiller to patients they thought would not survive. I slide my DVD into the machine, cue it up, adjust the volume, and sit in the swivel chair behind the instructor console at the front of the room. The flooded, haunted streets of New Orleans fill the screen. There is a loud, sharp bang. What was that? One of my students asks this. It must be a car backfiring, I think. I rise from my chair at the computer console and walk over to the classroom door. I open it. 2 more shots. I know what they are. I close the door slightly as if to barricade us in, but then I look at the emergency exit right by our classroom door. The exit is just a few steps away, so close that I could sprint through it in 3 big leaps. Funny, I think, there's a car parked right up at the door, a white car, in my memory something practical and boxy like an older Accord. I do not connect the shots with the car until later, that he parked there, not in the parking lot, to block our exit. I throw the door open, turn to my students, and say, "Get out." They fly over the desks and they're gone through the emergency exit in an instant. They scatter, run to their cars, and screech off away from campus. Outside, I stand dazed in the April sun, uncomprehending. We're the only ones outside. Why isn't everyone pouring out the front doors? I hear more bangs, and I wonder if everyone inside is dying. My student Gavin screams at me to get into his car, and I do for a moment while he frantically tries to dial 911. I remember the screen on his phone, that neat grid of numbers, and how he keeps messing it up over and over again, his hand shaking, unable to even get the sequence of those 3 numbers right. Holy shit, he keeps saying over and over. Holy shit. I have to see what's happening, I tell him, and he reluctantly lets me out. I walk back toward the entrances. The college's doors are just to the right of the mall entrance. The white car is still parked in front of the emergency exit from which we'd just fled moments, hours ago. It's a Friday afternoon, and there are plenty of other cars in the lot, mall patrons and college staff and students mingled. Still, no one emerges from either set of doors. I cannot figure out why. Why aren't people coming out? Where is everyone? Why am I the only one out here? I wonder if I have made a horrific mistake and traumatized my students for no reason. Maybe it was just a car backfiring. Maybe I panicked and irrevocably fucked this up. In 3 days, it will be the 6th anniversary of the Virginia Tech massacre in Blacksburg, just down the road, where a student murdered 32 people. Maybe that was in my subconscious. Maybe I overreacted. 3 more shots. Now I feel fear. The bones in my legs melt and I collapse to the pavement, shaking. Silver confetti glitters at the corners of my vision, and lines from an old Tori Amos song float in my head. This is not really this is not really happening. You bet your life it is.
And you just heard it, but Megan, I mean, your book is just so, you're so brave and courageous.
As are you.
It's just, and you have had me thinking a lot about this question about safety. You write about it. It's a point that you come back to, and if I may. Can I read a little blurb? I'll read a poem of mine, but there's a little blurb on the women's shelter.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So this is from Megan's book. During my first spring in the new house, a friend invites me to an information session about the local women's shelter. The program director begins with a litany of facts about domestic violence in our area. She shows slides of the safe house without revealing its exterior. It's comfortable and homey, with a big kitchen and bunk beds, plenty of books, toys, laundry facilities. From the outside, you would never know its true purpose. She explains the protocol for how they respond to calls for help. The first thing we ask when a woman calls us is, "Are you safe?" she says. Sometimes women say yes. Sometimes they say, well, I don't know. He's drunk and he's got a gun and he's just gone out for more beer. Our first priority is to establish whether the caller and children, if there are children, are safe. Are you safe? Sitting in the back of the conference room with my cup of water and plate of snacks, I wonder how I would have answered that question had someone ever asked me. And I have to say that when I read that, I thought, I think I circled around and that question, and I thought, wow, what did I? It's a scary question to ask yourself in the moment when you're in it, right? And so I wasn't exactly in a domestic violence situation, but there was violence all around. And, the gun thing, well, it's the Eastern Shore, it's the culture of the Eastern Shore. My ex-husband is a hunter, my oldest son, I mean, both the boys hunted, but my oldest son was really, more into it. The younger one, he got a Sika deer and was like, okay, I'm done. But it was not, as I reflect on it, I think I really needed to ask myself that. Why didn't I really ask myself that question? So this poem it's the first poem in Postmortem Say. It's called Ammunition. After Fang snapped photos of the boys and sent them to you to show he knew where we lived and where they went to daycare, your carry permit came in 2 days, and so did the state police, who drove from Pikesville to surveil our home the way you surveil with trail cams, the deer you hunt with your bow and muzzleloader, the 12 gauge that leans against the safe in the game room where you keep all your dead. Your 45 caliber Sig Sauer is the thing you said would keep us safe, that you still keep loaded, no safety, in your jeans drawer. Because a gun is no good if you can't get to it in time. Because a good man with a gun is better than. Because the worst part of a threat is the always waiting but never knowing when of it. Sometimes I dream I die at the Food Lion, close range, a single shot to the head, my blood spattering frozen peas and lima beans. Sometimes I dream you die, your body bagged, loaded on a stretcher outside the county courthouse. I've learned to live with drawerfuls of shot shells and the clink of brass bullets as they spill from your pockets in the spin cycle. I have learned the hollow point bullet is best for self-defense because of the way it blooms in soft tissue. But the day you left your Sig loaded on the kitchen table, the boys were home, and I learned I could say it. I will leave you. How many times have I sworn it? Don't make promises you can't keep, Chekhov said. One must not put a loaded rifle on the stage if no one is thinking of firing it. Yet here we are, loaded guns across the page, and I still can't pull the trigger.
I know that you and I had this conversation with each other, but I think that there were so many moments where we read each other's work and just thought, yeah, like they were like lightning bolts of recognition. That I think there were moments where we had uttered the same words, and that was Can I read part of a little bit of Portent?
Ooh, sure.
Yeah. So this is another one of Amanda's poems that I think I'm gonna try to tie back again to the safety question. So this is Portent. He'd gone again, dressed in camo and a bulletproof vest, Sig at his hip. Gone despite her constant nagging. The why go if you don't have to? And what if something happens, please? But where else the exhilaration? With their sickly boys, 3 and 1, who never slept. With his depressed, distant wife who left piles of laundry, never cooked, cleaned, gardened. Who cut her eyes at him. Yes, he'd seen her. His heavy foot, the shaking floor. Still, he always came home, no different tonight, but for the quickly conjured summer storm. His pickup struck by lightning as he pulled into the drive, and he nearly burned alive while she'd been, where? Safe inside, and later swore she hadn't heard him. Unlock it, damn it! His fists on the door. And the annotation, that I made to myself is that the threat is not outside. The threat is coming home.
Yep.
And
Yep.
one of the things that I learned, in the writing of my book is that, the number one reason why people say that they own firearms is for protection. And so they are imagining, a peril outside the home. But I think both of us have had experiences where, that danger comes from, it's in the house. It's with you. It's in the relationship that is supposed to be the one that is, that is safest. And it's in the school, which is also supposed to be, a sanctuary.
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, it was always like, the threat was actually one of my threat was always elsewhere. Is what a line that I recently wrote. Right, I always thought it was elsewhere, and was never really looking at what And so this idea of really looking at something and seeing it for what it is an idea that more recently I've been coming back to. Like, what did I miss? What did I not see? How could I not? How could I have not seen it? Yeah. And so you're worried about the threats we got from the pagans in jail, the motorcycle gang, and we had the state police come out and install cameras outside of our house for surveillance and everything. So always worried about that, and then and yet it was right there.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if there's an element of if a person asks themselves, like, am I safe? You have to be prepared for that answer to be no, because if it's not, then what? Then you have to do something, and that's a much more difficult question to ask. And one of the things that I mentioned is that I always ask myself, are you happy? Yeah, and then I would justify that and say, like, oh, no, well, no, but who's happy? Like, who does it, what is that, like, no one's happy all the time or something. But I never asked, like, am I safe?
Am I safe? Yeah.
So we have to welcome Nancy to the panel, our artist who has created art out of her own grief and trauma, something that connects, I think, all three of our artists here, and I would say even myself to some extent, since I have definitely looked at my own personal trauma. But this isn't about me. This is about these incredible writers. I do have to add my thanks to Leah Mehta and the Choice Center. We could not have done this without her and her guidance, so thank you. And also to Alyssa Maru, who is just helped organize this wonderful event and as well curate this amazing exhibit. So thank you on behalf of the Washington Writers Publishing House. So as I visited this art a few weeks ago, and what really struck me is something on the wall about, and now I'm going to probably say it incorrectly, Ubuntu, which is often translated as I am because we are. It's the philosophy that is coming from the artist from South Africa about interconnectedness, communal solidarity, and collective well-being. And I think today, as we're 1 week past what I know many of us found as a challenging political moment, I almost have to take a deep breath and ask, in the spirit of community that really extends, as the artwork says, beyond family ties, and encompassing broader social networks and mutual support, something that South Africa has really focused on in building and rebuilding their identity. This I am because we are How does it speak to your work? How does it speak to your sense of safety?
In terms of my work, how does it, okay.
I'm going to put
yeah.
your couple
I think you need to turn on, the green light.
there.
Oh, okay.
Some of Nancy's art. So that's her art from.
So that's the cover of Amanda's book. We'll just hold it up. You can't see it very well. This painting, my son is a recovered addict, and he's been sober for going on 25 years. But during the time, I kept having dreams about him being using nightmares, and I knew it. You know, you just know these things. I knew it. And I was up in Provincetown for a winter residency, and I don't know, I was working on some other things, and I just picked up the brush. I always take art supplies because when I'm not writing, I try to do something, and it came out, and it was probably, just a few strokes. But the thing is that you said it's dark. It is dark. Yeah, it's dark. Things are dark. We can't put a smiley face on it. So when Amanda chose that and really wanted that, it was wonderful because I couldn't hang this in my house. My husband couldn't bear to look at it. So for someone to say, I feel like it was waiting for you. And so for me, it's like you can transform trauma through art. It's like the Jungian theory of transformation. And do I feel safe? Not anymore.
Right.
Not anymore. Can I walk through a park by myself? No. I don't think any women would feel okay walking through a park. Do I feel valued in my culture? No. So no, I don't. So maybe I'll paint about it or write about it. But I'm sorry, I can't put a smiley face.
That's okay. I said it's powerful and it's dark and it's meant to be. But
I didn't even know what it was going to be, and it was just like, he got sober, but when you know these things and you know them in your gut and you have no way of knowing until I did that. I mean, this was my son's face. I didn't expect that. I didn't know where the brush was going to go. So does that answer your question? Is that helpful? Or
I don't know if I was asking particularly about being hopeful as
Right.
more that how do we seek community at this moment? And if you've had that as artists, or is it reflected in any way in your work? Because the artists in this room are trying to put together how they exist as individuals within a larger community.
I don't think the making art made me feel a part of the community. When you write a poem, when you write, it's not a place of connectedness with other people. It's a place of facing a lot. So I don't feel the connectedness, but when Amanda wanted the painting for her book, and this book has moved so many people, that's community. That's how community is built, by sharing your pain. And then for someone to say, I feel you, that's community for me. So.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Megan, is there thought on your side?
There was.
Yes. It's okay.
I just
Sure, go ahead.
I just completely forgot for a second.
In terms of, I'll speak loudly, that quote that you gave, that Caroline just talked about, the South African kind of coming together. I was wondering what your observation of how differently we are here in the US, in the communities that you've been in. versus that time you spent in South Africa? How is the conversation unfolding in the private and communal spaces? And what is community? What is this you or we are? Who are we there, I guess? I know it's a very general question, but
Yeah.
just anecdotally, perhaps.
So my husband is South African, and so we go back. We try to go back every year to see his family, and I think one of the things that I recognize a lot is this kind of a group laughter sometimes at the way things are, like when in some of the when there are like rolling blackouts, and that means that the like the traffic lights go out for hours at a time, and like what can you do? Nothing. So, and I think about some of the intersections in Christiansburg where I live, and I think if the traffic lights were out for 6 hours a day, like there would be some real problems. And I don't know. My senses are I want to be clear about what my limitation, how limited my perspective is. But I do think there's a sense of like, well, here we all are. Like, what are we going to do? Like, it's you can't do anything other than just kind of laugh at the way things are sometimes.
But it's here we all are, not here I am in isolation.
Yeah.
Is that slightly different there? I mean, just the we and the I, like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is this sense when you're out in Christiansburg and the areas around Virginia that everyone is first protecting themselves, that tying it back to the responsibility, that the me, the me of America, that I am on my own. I'm going to make this work out for me. I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to protect my home. And it's so...
Right. America's built on the rugged individualism. And when we talk about a collective we here in America, I think we have a challenge. And I think that's the challenge that we're seeing now. Just to dive into another question that I had. I mean, in this time, the moment that we find ourselves in as artists in such a polarized country, I mean, what do we see as artists or our work as a response to that? Or do we not have a response? Do we need the time to bring it together? I mean, you wrote you're unarmed for a reason, Megan. It's almost, what were you trying to say to this polarized world where half the people think we should strengthen the Second Amendment and half the people think, don't. Time to rethink what that means.
I've come back a lot to, I'm actually not sure whether this is an apocryphal story, but I have heard this story of a Vietnam veteran who used to camp out in front of the White House for years and, kind of demonstrating against the war and wars in general. And someone said to him, like, why are you doing this? It's not going to, you're not going to change anything. And he said, I do it so that it won't change me. I do it so that they won't change me. It's not because I think it's going to do anything. And I think that really echoes for me in the sense that I don't want to become, I feel like I have banged up against what from my perspective is just incomprehensibly nihilistic language and behavior from people on sort of the very pro-gun side. And I won't let that happen to me. I can't let that happen. But I will put in a plug for the New Yorker Critics at Large podcast. Yesterday did an episode about like what is like art for us right now. So they all talked about this, and one of the things that one of the hosts said was that, and I know that I'm sort of feeling this way, is that politics is kind of occupying a massive amount of my mind, but one of the hosts said that is its own kind of authoritarianism. It's an they said he called it an authoritarianism of the mind, and that art allows us to contemplate and to imagine possibility, and that it is an act of generosity.
Mm,
I think so.
I love that.
Yes, thank you. Vincent Cunningham, not me.
So-
Can I speak to that? I actually
Yeah.
have a question too for Leah, and want to actually, I want to show the horse as well. And Nancy, I'm gonna, I think it's true that we mostly, at least as writers, create our art on our, individually and in isolation. I do think that there is something more, communal about it, and so I've been doing a lot of work the last few months, just like learning more about the energetic body and all these sorts of things. And I'm no expert, but I do know that the healing, and this is like really all you need to know. If you ask me a question, I couldn't tell you any more than this, but the healing channel energetically is the same channel as the creative channel, and so I think when I look at the art that's on the wall here, and I see, the faces and figures, when I look at Nancy's, the cover art, when I look at a figure like this, I think to me, it's all, it is a higher connection to spirit, however you want to define that or describe that, however you want to say God, right? I think that, and to the Ubuntu, it's very, in a way, it is very kind of Buddhist, right? There is that teaching that there is no one out there, there is no other out there. And Leah, and I just want to say, like, Leah is a poet and a novelist as well. And her latest book, The Story of the World Before the Fence, you actually write a lot about, Caroline, you mentioned community. Can you speak to, you write so poignantly about community and disappearing community. Can you speak to that from your experience as a writer?
That's such a hard question.
Go for it, my dear.
I'm gonna have to think about that. Maybe we'll come back to that. That's a very difficult question. This one isn't.
This one is the
This
one.
Okay. But I wanted to sort of relate it to that. I mean, part of what I've been sort of struggling with for a long time creatively is this idea that language is its own battleground state, so to speak. We use these terms, these violent terms to describe the country, to describe these states. Everybody is at war. It's this war room language. And the idea of the politics of language is, how do we begin to think about language differently? How do we show agency and repossess language and soften it so that, because we've been ratcheting it up, we're screaming very loudly, we're very upset. But how do we kind of bring it back down and start to talk about words like responsibility? Why are they not part of our lexicon? Why is the I and not the we? The idea that we are these moving communities of people who are attempting safety. And if we are attempting safety and responsibility, and if that is our communal endeavor, then how do we talk about the language that takes us there? Because so much of propaganda is language, and that kind of language that gives us a dopamine fix, but doesn't necessarily lead to anything productive, doesn't lead to a generative kind of body. And so from a creative perspective, yes, I completely agree with you that in my work that I have explored trauma through the creative outlets. And I feel like without the reader and without the voice, the speaking, that kind of the agency that you can have as a woman with your voice, is something that immediately takes you into the communal with others. And the curation process in itself is the coming together of people who are caring and curating for the arts, and developing their own narratives and depth of knowledge into a subject which we may not have thought about a certain way. So this kind of community allows us to do that and talk about words like safety and responsibility.
Nancy?
I was just going to say, I'm sorry, Leah, that Leah is one of the most, she brings people together, you know, at your house. When I'm at your house, there are always people there. There's always food. There's always sit down. There's always, she brings people together in community. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Well, I building on this, the sense of, you know, the contemplative for as a role for art, the moment that we can actually think about the issues and not be screaming and yelling at each other, I think is rare right now in America. And I do think that it's the role of artists to sort of bring the language into the thoughtful, meditative moment. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge because the other side will shout louder then. And I think it's part of our goal of sort of quiet resistance is to say, no, we're not going to shout back. On that, to end on a hopeful note, because I am the eternal optimist in life, I thought of what our vice president said in her concession speech. Only when it's dark enough can you see the stars. Only when it's dark enough can you see the stars, she said, quoting Martin Luther King when she spoke to the Howard University students. So how do we find the stars? How do we find in today's world as artists, as thoughtful people, the joy and the hope? Because I cannot believe it is over. It is out there for us.
What's here, you know, right here. And I think the joy is in the work, don't you, Amanda? The joy is doing the work. Refke also has a line that in a dark time, the eye begins to see. And I think to be willing to go through it and be in the face of it is when you start to see other things. We have to be in this dark place for a while. And this is community here. We're all here. Nobody's yelling. I mean, it's not happening here.
Yeah.
It's happening out there. But Amanda, I just wanted to just mention that Amanda came to read in my town. I do a little reading series called Poets Corner. The city's given me a little space to have poetry readings for guests. And it was right after Roe versus Wade and the poems that you read. I live in a red county. Our city's a little blue dot in a sea of red. But these were ladies from the, county, and you were reading pro, choice poems, and that's what happened, is that they were moved this way, not here. Art goes here. It bypasses the brain. Thank God.
Yeah.
The tyrant, the eternal tyrant, the brain. So I don't know. I just think that this is a beautiful way to do it, to keep doing these things.
Yeah, and the publishing the books is a big part of it as well. I mean, the publishers are doing that, independent publishers.
I think that, I know Megan has told the story in other places where, she she came to us after trying for many other avenues. So yes, the Washington Writers Publishing House is 50 years old. We are the longest continuously operating cooperative press, which means all volunteer press in the United States, and we're very proud to have published her book. I was stunned by Amanda's book as she talks about the trauma on her body. And I think that she also talks about it not only as a personal, but she talks about it as a woman, as something that we all can relate to. And that's why all of those women who may not, vote the same way we did could feel it viscerally, because you spoke to the we, the collective women. And I think we need to be using that first person plural more. Do we want to end on any, Amanda, do you have any thoughts you were looking through?
I'm like furiously looking, as much as I've dog-eared
Yeah.
Megan, and tabbed the pages. Where's that one passage? Where's that one passage? But you talk about the so beautifully about in the wake of trauma, the urgency to get living.
Oh. I'm just going to share a funny teaching story, because this was my response to the stars and everything. So there's a chapter in here that is interwoven with Frankenstein. So I love Frankenstein. I'm teaching Frankenstein right now. Not all the students have loved it, but some of them have. But the other day, my students, one of my classes, they wanted to call the monster Junior. They don't want to call him the monster, so we're calling him Junior. And so Junior has been, tearing his way through Geneva, strangling people right and left. And I came in and they were having this conversation, and one of them said, well, so how big are Junior's hands really? And another student said, well, he's 8 feet tall. I mean, you do the math, I don't, and then they said, Megan, can you look up, who's the tallest guy in the whole world? What are the record holders? Who's been the tallest person? And then they're going, well, okay, so if you're 8'4", then your feet are probably like this, and your hands are this size and everything. And then another one says, I don't know why Victor didn't just make a whole Hobbit-sized army of little monsters, and then Junior wouldn't be alone, and he wouldn't have had to go and kill all these other people. And another one said, yeah, what a dumbass. Why did he do that? So that's bringing me joy that my students that they're talking about how. What are the dimensions of this monster really? Let's have, so that's the funny.
You say, here it is, on page 31. I felt like time was slipping away, and that if I didn't seize the opportunity now, I never would. I was starting to realize how short life really was and how urgently I had to live it, a realization that would hit me even harder after the shooting, but at the time I could not see how to do it. And so I think, anyone who has gone through and endured any kind of trauma, there's a point where you can crumble, and you do.
Yeah.
But then it's oh my gosh, I want to actually live.
Yeah.
And I want to make it, and I don't want to live small.
Yes.
And so regardless of what's happening, I think those kinds of moments of joy, or, you're painting, you're writing this kind of a gathering, the light does what? It expands, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we follow that.
Yeah. Yeah.